The founders are self-described Marxists, trained Marxists. Marx wanted to dethrone God, was an atheist, and Marx did not believe in capitalism, let alone entrepreneurship. All the things that made black people still survive in virulent racism are now under attack by organizations like Black Lives Matter.
All of those things have always been under attack by white supremacy. You can go back to things like whether it's the Tulsa race massacres, like every time black people do create these systems that are our systems and we are the entrepreneurs, it seems like white supremacy finds a way to destroy it.
Every time, look, the Tulsa massacre, within about 5 years, that whole area was rebuilt. It was not even called the Black Wall Street until after it was rebuilt. And it was rebuilt, by the way, by black people without one dime of government money.
Yeah, but who destroyed it to begin with?
It was racists who destroyed it. No question about it. We've had race riots, but so have Japanese.
So you do agree that there's racism? I'm just so confused.
I never even came close to saying. I never came close to saying there was no racism.
You just said you don't think it's systemic racism.
Not anymore. Obviously, there was. We had something called slavery. We had something called Jim Crow.
That destroyed black. Hold on, sir. That was system that destroyed. That was the system that destroyed Black Wall Street. It's the same system right now that's not even wanting to pay those same living descendants, because I know your position on reparations, but those same living descendants of Black Wall Street.
Yep, this again. This was the moment in the conversation when everything went left.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Man, welcome back to another episode of the Ruling Class Podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Diddy, back up in this bitch with another video. Listen, if you're new to the show, please know we thirsty to grow and to drink some of this warm water with lemon. You can help me out by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a sec to do that to help me out. Just hit that like button for me. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. And I appreciate everybody who liked the video and subscribed to the channel. All right, so look, man, we got to talk about it. Mr. Larry Elder, who is a GOP presidential candidate right now, went onto the Breakfast Club, I believe, late last week. And they talked about, the state of the black community. They talked about systemic racism. And look, I understand this is a growing community right now, and it's very trendy for people to expose or call out other people who believe that systemic racism is real. And I understand a lot of people believe that systemic racism is a myth. A lot of people believe that systemic racism is an excuse for black people to be lazy and blame other people for their shortcomings. I'm well aware of what they believe. And I'll be the first to admit, despite being somebody who have a lot of right-leaning perspectives, or a lot of conservative perspectives, I do. But I am somebody who dropped a video a few days ago that is entitled "The Moment I Realized That Systemic Racism Might Just Be a Real Thing." And I stand behind everything I said in that video, right? A lot of times as humans, we can only go by, based on our experiences. That's where data comes from, right? It's based on the things that happened, and we judge things based on that. And based on my experiences, there's been some suspect things that have happened since I graduated last year with my master's, but I digress. We'll get into that later. So without further ado, we're going to get into this interview. We're going to react to it because things got really heated. So without further ado, let's check it out.
So let's jump right into it. Why are you running for president?
Well, I'm running as an America First mega guy, and we have an America First mega guy running, obviously. So the question is, what do you bring to the table?
You said MAGA.
MAGA.
Okay.
And the answer is, I bring a lot of issues to the table that I feel our side is not talking enough about, if at all. For example, the number one social problem in America, by far, is the epidemic not of COVID, but of fatherlessness.
Facts.
70% of black kids today enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. Now 25% of white kids enter the world today without a father in the home, married to the mother. And the stats are clear. Even Barack Obama once cited them. If you're raised without a dad, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. What's happened? In the mid-'60s, with I think the best of intentions, a Democrat named Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. And since then, we have incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. When I say this to people, the pushback I get is, well, there are lots of things that are going on, systemic racism, poverty. Here's the problem. If you look at a young black male aged 10 to 43, that's young to me because I'm 71 years old. A young black man in that demo is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a young white man, same demo. Young black man, real young, 19 and under, the number one cause of preventable death is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black male. Same demo for whites. The number one cause of preventable death is unintentional deaths. That includes drug overdoses, automobile accidents, drownings. It's not until they get to number 4 that death is the cause. In America, 60% of the shootings, the robberies, and the homicides are committed by black people, often against other black people. Of the homicides in this country, half of them are black victims, almost all killed by other blacks. How do you explain that if it isn't for the absence of fathers?
Now, I think, first of all, this is something that Candace Owens said many years ago. If you've been following this channel, then you know that the absence of fathers in the home, I do agree. I find that to be the biggest epidemic in the world, not just in the black community, but in the world today, but especially in this country. That's something I talked about several times. If you have not checked out this video, by the way, where we talked about this, we went even deeper than he did in the statistics that support the assertion that he's making right now, which is spot on. It's actually a lot worse than what he's talking about. The impact of fathers not being in the home is actually a lot worse.
Many diseases can be predicted based on the absence of certain vitamins. Many societal ills can be predicted based on the absence of a father, right? There are many statistics. Let's read some of them off. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway youths are from fatherless homes. I'm one of them. 85% of children who exhibit behavioral disorders are from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. 70% of youth in state institutions are from fatherless homes. 75% of adolescent patients in substance abuse centers are from fatherless homes. 85% of grapists motivated by displaced anger are from fatherless homes. 71% of teenage pregnancies are to children of single parents. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, nearly 75% of American children living in single-parent families will experience poverty by the time they turn 11.
If you look at a lot of the stats, man, it's really, really bad. I remember when Candace Owens talked about this at that little debate that she had with T.I., and I entitled that video, I believe, "The Moment That Everything Changed for Me." Candace Owens changed everything for me, or something like that. She spit nothing but facts, and he's kind of regurgitating a lot of the same things that she said, and I think it's a great point.
Be prepared to say black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime. I doubt it. And the go-to reaction often is poverty and systemic racism. Here's the problem. 1940, when there was blatant racism. This is before Brown versus Board of Education, before the Civil Rights Act of 64. KKK was still alive and well. 87% of blacks lived under the poverty line.
Okay, see, this is my problem right here. 87% of black people lived below the poverty line or above the poverty line in 1940. Not saying that these stats are not real. Not saying that what he's saying is not true. But I have a question. Where in the world is he getting his stats from? Where is he getting these from? If you look at this chart here, the best that I can find is this chart that you're looking at, right? The furthest back that we go when it comes to the poverty rate in our community, I think the most, credible source that you find is the Census Bureau, right? So this is my biggest problem. I want to know, like, a lot of times whenever we hear somebody stating nothing but facts, which is what he's been doing since he started speaking in this interview so far, a lot of times when they say other things, you just think that they're automatically telling the truth since they've been spinning facts so far, but you don't want to check anything that they're saying. And my question is, when you Google it and you look up where did he get these stats from, 87% of the black community is above the poverty line, you find .coms, as you can see right here. You see nothing but .coms, but you don't see any .orgs, you don't see any .govs. I don't see any credible sources that substantiate the things that he's saying, and that's my problem, right? So the assertion that more black Americans lived above the poverty line before the civil rights era compared to 2023 is just not supported by historical or contemporary data. In the United States, the civil rights era, which we're very aware of, right, which gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s, aimed to end racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement of black Americans. While progress has been made, as I'm sure we all know that it has been made, obviously, right, since that time, racial disparities and economic inequalities still persist. Before the civil rights era, many black Americans faced systemic racism, segregation, and limited access to education and economic opportunities. Poverty rates among black Americans were often higher than those among white Americans. After the civil rights movement, there were improvements in some aspects of civil rights and legal protections, but economic disparities have always been a problem in this country, and they still have not been fully eliminated. In 2023, when you talk about disparities, right, you're still looking at income, wealth, education, employment opportunities. These things still exist, bro. And with black Americans disproportionately affected by poverty and economic inequality, compared to white Americans, various factors contribute to these disparities, right? Including historical inequality, systemic racism, and ongoing socioeconomic challenges. It's important to rely on data and research to understand complex social and economic issues, and the claim that more Black Americans lived above the poverty line before the civil rights era, the way that Mr. Elder here just said, it's just not substantiated by credible sources, bro. So this right here is one of my biggest problems. It's not that I'm saying what he's stating here is not true. I'm just wondering where he get these stats from. Just because he's 71, which, by the way, he looks great for 71. Just because he's 71 and he's stating these things don't make them true. Just because you lived during that time does not make what you're saying true. Just show me the stats that substantiate and back up the things that you're saying, bro. Because this is one of my biggest problems. You make a claim like that, you need to come with the data and the stats to back it up. And I have not been able to find it. If you all are able to find it, I'm not saying that it's not true. Send it to me on Instagram. Drop it in the comment section or something. I love to see these stats, to see what he's talking about, because I can't find these stats at all.
Now it's about 14%. You can't blame it on poverty. You can't blame it on racism. It is the breakdown of the nuclear intact family, and neither side is talking about it. The left doesn't talk about it because they caused it with the welfare state, and our side does not talk about it because if you're white, you'll be accused of dissing single moms who are heroically raising these kids, or you'll be accused of being a racist, or if you're Black, you'll be accused, as I was by the LA Times, of being the black face of white supremacy. Nobody's talking about that. I am.
What are the reasons, if your statistics are right, what are the reasons that you think fathers aren't in the home?
As I said, it's because in the mid-'60s, Lyndon Johnson launched what he called the War on Poverty. In Charlemagne, literally, they sent social workers door to door in the inner city. I remember this. Mm-hmm. Advising women of the availability of welfare provided there was no man in the house. It created an economic incentive for women to marry the government. Same thing with whites. In 1965, 8% of whites entered the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. Now it's about 25%, also up threefold. Look at census data, 1910, 1920, 1930, in places like Milwaukee, Chicago, Philadelphia, a young Black kid was slightly more likely to be brought into a world with a father in the home married to the mother than a young white kid. We have incentivized this kind of bad behavior, and it's had a disproportionately bad effect on the Black community.
Let me ask you a question. What do white people do wrong?
And that right there, that question right there, before you even hear the response, Charlemagne just asked, what does white people do wrong? And this is where everything goes left. And if you are a conservative or you're more right-leaning than anything else, I can understand when you hear that question, it probably makes you cringe. It's like, here you go talking about white people. Here you go wanting to blame white people. I already know where this is going to go. I already know how a lot of you feel. But I actually know why Charlemagne is asking that question. And I'm going to explain it a little bit later because there's somebody, once again, who's more about self-accountability, working hard to earn what it is that you want out of life. I'm somebody who's I'm a staunch believer in that. But I know where he's coming from with that perspective. So we're going to talk about that here in a second.
Larry Eld.
What do you mean, what do white people do? I'm not worried about white people. I'm worried about what's going on with us.
But if there's systemic racism in this country, which we know it is.
No, I don't say there is. You say there is. I don't believe that.
Oh, you don't believe there's
No, there
racism?
used to be, obviously. Tell me what you think the number one systemic example of systemic racism is in America.
Oh man, there's so many.
Just give me the most important one you think.
At the top of mind, I'd probably maybe say mass incarceration. Maybe.
Really? During the Great Depression, when 50% of Black adults were unemployed, you didn't have this kind of mass incarceration. It's the breakdown of the family.
I'm not going to. I agree with the family part. I'm a Black man who is a father to his children, and I'm a happily married Black man to a Black woman. So I'm never going to argue with that part. But I just feel like everything is black with you. Black is wrong. Black people do this and Black people do that. And when I ask you what white people do wrong, you said you're not worried about white people at all.
I'm talking about the disproportionate damage going on in the Black community. For example, look at these smash and grabs that are taking place in Los Angeles where I live. There's a suburb called Glendale where at a mall recently, a mob of 30 to 40 people, they had masks on, but one guy got popped. He was Black. And I think most of those who were doing this were Black. And in recent years and times, there have been a number of these in places like Chicago, places like New York. If I were involved in something like that, Charlemagne, I grew up with a dad, just as you're raising your own children. I would have been more afraid of my father than I would about the cops catching me. These kids are afraid of neither. They don't have a father in the home. Cops are demoralized. They're pulling back. Their manpower is short. And as a result, you tell a bad guy you're less likely to be caught, convicted, incarcerated, crime goes up. They may be criminals, but they're not stupid. Mm-hmm. When you say, what do white people do? I mean, this is a country that has struggled mightily to get over its historic racism. There was a civil war. There was a big civil rights movement. This is the only majority white country that's ever elected a black president, let alone reelected a black president. The three biggest cities.
I just want to say something about that part. He's spitting facts. He is, but I just want to say something because you saying this is the only country that's ever elected a black president, or this is a country that's elected a black president, whatever. That's always a very, very misleading thing to say because, as the popular saying goes, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because a person's skin color is a particular way, doesn't mean that their ideologies align with what's in favor for that particular community. Because a lot of people can make the argument that while Barack Obama making it to the presidential status was incredible, the biggest thing that he did for the so-called black community was give hope by way of representation, if anything else. Because when you look at policies and things of that sort and what he actually did, tangible things that he did to help the black community during his 8 years in office, regardless of what side you're on, right, left, middle, I don't care if you're up, down, it don't matter. I think we can all agree for the most part he didn't really do much for the black community at all besides give hope. Anybody gonna dispute that? So you just saying that for what it is. I mean, what does that mean, bro? He could be there just for for the face, but if his ideologies doesn't align for what's best for the so-called black community, who cares what skin color they are, right?
America or New York, Chicago, LA, they all have black mayors, even though no city has a majority of black population. The president of Harvard is a black female. Martin Luther King in 1966, Charlemagne, gave an interview to the BBC. This is 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of 64 got passed. And he said, I'm amazed at how many positive changes there have been in America in the last 2 years. Why, if things keep going like this, we could have a black president in about 40 years' time. Mm-hmm. Do the math. Right on cue, Barack Obama elected 2008. He didn't say there'll be a black female president of Harvard, and there has been. He didn't say there are going to be black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been several.
There's been several, but there's been it's a very small number. Not complaining or anything, but I'm just saying he's saying all these things and grouping them together to make it sound good. And a lot of people do this with their words. And again, I'm not against everything that he's saying. I agree with the majority of things that he's saying. But again, two things can be true at the same time. You can be saying facts and also misleading with some of your statistics, right? The number of so-called black people that's been the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, I don't have the stats right here in front of me, but I actually did a video on this before, and I can link it up here if I can remember the name of the video. But it's a minute, small number of people. Like even in proportion to the black population in America, the number is substantially small, very insignificant. So it's kind of misleading to say that.
He didn't say the percentage of the House would equal the percentage of black people in the population, and it does. He didn't say the three largest cities would have black mayors, and they do. He didn't say the largest and most prestigious organization of doctors, the American Medical Association, would have 2 black presidents, and there have been. He didn't say the most prestigious organization of lawyers, the American Bar Association, would have 2 black presidents, and they have. He said president, meaning at that point, I can feel that I've reached the mountaintop, which is the speech he gave right before he got assassinated the day before. And now we act as if Barack Obama never even got elected. And we're still talking about systemic racism. It's not fair. It's wrong. And you're discouraging black people from working hard.
And I believe that that's true as well. Again, two things can be true at the same time. When all you do is you talk about white supremacy, and white people this, and systemic racism, and holding us down, and holding us back, and hating on us, and they don't like us, and this, that, and the third. They're not giving us opportunities. When that's all you talk about, and you're not telling, black young men and young black women to work hard and still control the things that you can control, and tell them that they can still be successful despite whatever system you feel like is in place. I feel like that's very dangerous, and you are encouraging them to be lazy. You're encouraging them not to work hard. You're encouraging them. You're instilling this sort of fear and this almost hesitancy to strive to be the best version of themselves, when they feel like, well, no matter what I do, it's going to be these obstacles in the way anyway, so why even try hard, right? Don't give them an excuse, right? But at the same time, that's why I say is two things can be true at the same time. I don't understand why people can't be in the middle. Why do you have to be extreme over here or extreme over here? Just be honest about what it is, and it's right there in your face. Those things, I feel like the right way to go about this is to say, these things are in place, but they're not as bad as they used to be.
1996.
Okay. Mr. Elder, a quick question. Let's just remove the word racism, since that seems to be a word that triggers, a conversation down the water hole. Let's just focus on the word system.
Okay.
You mentioned that the system was the one that discouraged. And again, we have no problem with agreeing that the family, the Black family, should certainly has some room for some improvement. But let's just focus on system.
Room for
you said that the
improvement?
system. Well, we're not going to go down that water. We're not going to go down that water hole. Let's get to the question. So the question is, you said that the system encouraged Black women to be single mothers, correct?
I said the welfare state, yes.
The welfare, the system. So who's in
Okay.
charge of the system? Who was in charge of the system?
Well, it was Democrats that passed it.
And who were
The-
Democrats? Were they Black or white at that time?
Well, at the time, majority of Black people were Democrats, as the majority of Black people are Democrats now.
Not the voters. I'm talking about the system. Remember, the main idea is the word system. Who was in charge of the system at the time? The Democrats at the time, the system. I'm just going to Charlamagne's point about white or Black. Was it white Democrats in charge of the system or Black Democrats in charge of the system?
Well, if you're prepared to say that Lyndon Johnson did this viciously with an intent to destroy the Black family, I disagree. He did it with the best of intentions.
I didn't ask you that.
And if you look at the New York Times, which is left wing, the Washington Post, which is left wing, they cheered all of this.
Right. And what I'm asking was it white people, so I'm going to ask again in case my mic's not coming through clearly. Was it white people in charge of the system or Black people in charge of that system that helped break down the Black family? It's a simple yes, just a simple question, white or Black?
Well, you didn't have to go on welfare unless you voluntarily chose to go on welfare. The inducement was put there by Democrats, by the left.
Correct? Okay.
And this is my problem. A lot of people was clowning this lady and saying that she is what's wrong with the Black community and she was disrespectful. No, she wasn't disrespectful, right? Two things can be true at the same time. You're looking at a man who has a lot of conservative perspectives. I'm going to say it again. She made a great point, right? It's not always just about skin color, but the point that she's making is, hold on, let me get this straight. You're saying that systemic racism does not exist. But you can agree, which he agreed in this interview. You agree that racism exists. You do agree that racism exists. You just don't believe that systemic racism exists. You do agree that systemic racism was a problem in this country. So let me get this straight. Racism exists. Systemic racism used to exist, but not anymore. So you have racist people who still work in many of these organizations, but they're not being racist when it comes to the hiring process anymore. Systemic don't mean they're all getting together and they're working as a conglomerate and saying, hey, we're not going to hire Black people. No, it doesn't have to work that way. What the point is, there's a system in place, and the way that system is designed, it is not set up in a way in which it benefits a lot of so-called Black people, right? When you look at the numbers, it is very disproportionate as the amount of so-called Black people that are hired in many career fields. So many people have come out and made complaints about this stuff throughout the country for the last, I don't know how many years. Everybody's lying about their experiences. Everybody. Again, you can still be successful. Go somewhere else. Start your own business. I agree. But I'm saying, but to say that this stuff is not real, you're just delusional. She made a great point. He was dodging the question, right? He was dodging from answering the question. She's asking, who was in charge of this system? The answer to that question is white people. It doesn't mean all white people are racist, but it means white people. White, but he's want to focus on the party. It was the Democratic Party. The Republicans would have done better. Says who? There's many documentaries, there's much evidence out here that proves that both Republicans and Democrats are racist. Just because it was the Democrats that was doing it, bro, the point that she's making is there was no Black people. There wasn't very many of any Black people during that time that was in the Democratic Party. You're talking about who's voting for them. Right? That's a whole different conversation. It was white people in positions of power, regardless of their political power, and they put certain things in place that put so-called Black people at a disadvantage. There's no refuting that, bro.
Most black people were Democrats, and they voted for these white people.
Not
too.
Voters. I said who's in charge of the system.
Well, who puts them in charge?
Was Lyndon Johnson white or Black?
Who put them in charge?
Maybe that'll help you.
Fine. Lyndon Johnson was white.
Thank you.
Okay.
Boom.
But if your argument is that the reason he did it is because of racism, then I disagree. He did it because of
That's not my argument. I just asked you a simple question. Was he white or Black? Charlamagne?
And Mr. Elder, you said you talked about the smash and grabs, right? And I find that interesting because when you see the mass shootings that happen, majority of those people are white males. What do you think about that?
Actually,
that's a very small percentage.
The percentage of whites in America, which is 60%, the percentage of mass shooters is under that. The percentage of people that commit hate crime is under that. The percentage of people who are serial killers is under that.
Oh, yeah, Diddy got a podcast.